Hello, David Zritsky for the Bond Experience. Welcome back. For many years, I've given sort of a stock answer when people ask the inevitable, why do you like James Bond? Why do you like James Bond? I have laymen ask me that. I call them the normies. I think that was actually named by Calvin Dyson, patent pending normies. Yeah. And I have Bond fans like myself ask me, why do you like James Bond? Everybody has a different reason. A lot of them have overlap. And my stock answer has been, I love James Bond because it provides escapism. If I think of my favorite movies, I'm standing in front of some of them right now. We're in the middle of a 60th anniversary of Goldfinger. Next year we've got Thunderball. We've got a lot to celebrate. It's about escapism. We all have these jobs, whether it's your job as a family member, as a friend, your real job. It's a lot of stress, it's a lot of pressure sometimes. And sometimes we just want 2 to 2.5 hours to escape into a different world. And the fantasy of it, the adventure of it, the fact that it's not like anything that we do, all of that we embrace. And you've seen many videos on that. This is not quite that one because recently I've been changing my answer when people say, why do you like James Bond? Because I've always done it from the point of view of the franchise or the movies. Why do I like the franchise? Why do I like watching a James Bond movie? Escapism. But I've started to think about the character of James Bond. I mean, I wear items and dress and do fitness programs based on the character of James Bond, the look, the style, some of it from Fleming, some of it from movies, some of it from the actors, and some of it from my own DNA of inhabiting the Bond character. So I've changed the idea of why I like the Bond character to be about the attraction of what the character can do. The fact that this individual is highly skilled, experienced beyond the comprehension of a normal individual. And there's actually a term for this. It's called hypercompetency. Hypercompetency. Now, I didn't coin this term. I wish I did. I could retire. I'd write several novels on it, volumes 1 through 18, kind of a DIY of being hyper competent. But the whole idea of hyper competent is being to an extreme level of skill set and experience with a lot of different aspects of life, almost to a bar that cannot be raised high enough. Hyper competent individuals are those individuals who you look at them and go, wow, how can I be more like that in certain corners, certain skill sets, not everything. But Bond is hyper competent in everything. Look at Roger Moore's Bond. He can even identify butterflies, for goodness sakes. When did he have time to get to know the different butterflies? I don't have time for that. You don't have time for that. Roger Moore's James Bond understood butterflies. But that's only one small, fun, pithy, campy aspect of hypercompetency, because hypercompetency is the reason why I love James Bond. Now, if you know me, if you've watched this channel, if this is your first video, enjoy. There's others. But if you know my channel enough, you know that I have this goal in life. I do. It's a real goal. It's not made up for Instagram or YouTube. It is to try to become the best version of myself. Simple. I'm not in competition with other people. I'm not even trying to get the Bond body so much anymore. I'm trying to get the best version of myself physically, mentally, my life, my enjoyment. Is it working? Meh. It's okay. But I mean, this is a constant journey. I don't think I'm going to end until, I'm dead. And then even beyond, it's just going to be a legend. It's going to be a memory, right? So I'm in a constant competition, a constant journey with myself to get into the best version, because Bond is that high bar of skilled at everything. Let's take a couple of them as an example. First of all, we'll start with Connery's Bond. Connery's Bond is incredibly hyper competent with charming women. He just is. I am not, nor do I need to be. I'm married. Somehow I convinced Danielle years ago, many years ago, to engage with me and then get married and have kids, and now we have a life together. But Bond is incredibly good at that. I mean, it's in nearly every one of his movies. He's hyper competent in the whole idea of being able to woo people, his charm. Now, let's take that and revolve that around to our particular world. Interrelationships, relationships in general, being charming to a person. It doesn't have to be to woo them or anything like that, but engaging with an individual, finding out what their likes are, how to speak to them, how to communicate to them, and being, I'll just say it, sort of likable, but also relatable. That is a hyper competency that Bond has. And it's something that we can practice as well. Now, in my everyday job, real job, not this is, yeah, hobby. But in my everyday job as a president of a pharmaceutical marketing company, I have to engage with clients. And when I engage with clients, the one thing that I try to do is become affable. I don't need to be likable. All right. We have a job. We have a job to do. And if you do it well, I'm such a geek. We have a job to do. But the one thing I can do in my job is to be somebody that the clients like to engage with. You imagine getting a call from somebody that they don't like and they're like, ugh, this guy. So what I do is I try to walk in their shoes. I try to find out what drives the client. What is their important career jump, and what are they looking for in a partner in progress in me? I know. Like, I don't think about, oh, let me be, happy-go-lucky and jokey David. I don't. What I do is I try to think about how do I progress their journey along, and they like that. They like the fact that I'm focusing on them and not on myself. I'm inquisitive and I'm asking questions about them and not myself. And guess what? Hypercompetency in the world of charming and building relationships is that. It's actually finding out about the individual that you're talking to and building surround sound around them. All right? So that's one. Now, Bond has hypercompetency in language. I don't spreche de Deutsch. I don't spreche de anything except for maybe some broken English where I clearly, by the comments, I mispronounced everything. But I know a little bit of Hebrew, a little bit of French, tiny bit of German. But Bond is hyper competent in languages. He can speak to his environment. He can speak to the country and the culture that he's in, which helps him come to grips and connect with all of the individuals that speak this language. We've seen it in movies, we've seen it in Fleming, we've seen it cross-bear like this. So hyper-competency in language is not something that I own. It's not something I'll probably ever get because geography, she ain't my friend. And language, she ain't my friend. But I'm trying, I try to pick up things here and there. Danielle is on Dua de Lipe. Dua de Lipe, that's not it. No, Dua de Language, do some language. It's an app. You learn languages on there. I don't know, put it in the comments. I'll learn. But hypercompetency also transforms, and you can see some of it in Back to Me, to sports, right? You got a lot of sports going on here. This is my this is my cross to bear. I was not raised in a house of sports. My father was into sports. He would watch things. He wouldn't engage me. Weep, weep. Don't cry for me, Argentina. But it's true. It's true. I was never really and did never get into sports. But Bond can show up on a golf course. He can show up and do scuba and snorkeling. Bond can do almost any sport, yeah, even tennis and things like that, and do it really well. Like, that's all he's been doing. That's James Bond. He's hyper competent in those aspects. Now we've got to move from sports and charm and all those things to weaponry. And Bond has a weapon. And this is one that I used to, many years ago, oh gosh, I used to study Tung Sudo, which is a Korean martial arts, a lot of kicking, a lot of lower GI. Look at me, why am I dancing? That had nothing to do with it. Dance had nothing to do with it. But it was great. I learned weaponry. I learned hand-to-hand combat. I learned to protect myself and self-defense. I learned katas, the whole 9 yards. And I still, every now and then, as you've probably seen this from some of the videos, pick up a nunchuck or two and like to do, it helps in balance and everything. However, Bond has been trained as a weapon. Me, I took some after-school martial arts and I kept with it for many years. So I'm not a weapon. I'm not even a blunt weapon. Nope, not even a spoon. Never mind a knife. But Bond is. Bond has been trained to take care of himself, to have this skill set to not only dispatch somebody aggressively and proactively, but to defend himself and others. And it's not just in weaponry or hand-to-hand combat. Bond has been trained to use his environments. If he goes into a cafe and somebody's sitting there mopping the floor, this is mopping, by the way, folks, get your mind out of the gutter, mopping a floor, he is trained to break that mop, use the sharp end as a weapon, and dispatch whatever foes appear. He's hyper competent in not just the basics that we see or picking up a handgun or any kind of weapon. He can dispatch using his environment. And let's talk about weapons. Bond can pick up, as we've seen in films, and films don't lie, as we've seen in films, Bond can pick up any gun or tank or jet and use it as a weapon. He can use gadgets as weapons. He knows everything. Does he read the handbooks? We know he doesn't read the handbooks. Why can he do this? How can he do this? It's because he's hyper competent. So how does this relate to us? I'm trying to take this hyper competency of Bond and relating it to us so we can go a little bit farther in the journey of being that hyper competent individual. Well, me, I have taken up shooting. I have. I did it. My first gun that I owned was a Walther PPK because it had to be. I was doing it for Bond, just like, when I first started working out, I was doing it for Bond, right? Because I wanted to be hyper competent around guns, but also understanding the safety and the basics. Am I hyper competent with shooting today? Hells to the no, to the second power. No, because practice makes perfect and I don't practice enough. So it's a conscious decision to become hyper competent, really skilled at something. And I have taken it upon myself to be hyper skilled at other things. Weaponry is not one of them. Shooting a gun is not. However, I will say that I've now working, kind of alongside and engaging, if you will, with Walther and people like that. My interest to become hyper skilled in that area has gone up. We just had an event at Gatherall where we went to this place called Griffin and Howe. One of the most amazing ranges I've ever seen. Unbelievable. And of course, you get bitten by the bug. Bitten by the bug. Scorpion. Again, geek, you know me. So one of the things that I've done is I've now increased my practice to the point where instead of playing golf with a client, which I don't really like golf, sorry golf, I've actually started to take them to a range. I have this really nice executive range that's very close to me, perfect restaurants surrounding it. We'll get a bite to eat, no alcohol when you're shooting. We'll get a bite to eat and then we'll go shooting together. A lot of these people shooting for the first time, or they shoot and they're like, this is genius. Like, why are we playing golf when we could be shooting targets and things like that and having fun and working on our skill set? But those moments of engaging with work and play and shooting is helping me to become a little bit more skilled. Will I ever become hyper competent in guns? Probably not, because you have to spend a lot of time and it has to be a focus. I mean, we're not James Bond. James Bond can pick up any of that and become hyper competent at those things. And we've got to talk about knowledge, hyper competency with knowledge. And this is something where I'm a little jealous. I'm a little green-eyed jealous as far as Bond and knowledge when it comes to hyper competency. I spoke about it in the beginning with butterflies, but Bond knows a lot about everything. Geography, politics, individuals. How many times is M briefing him and says, well, do you know General Pupanak? And he's like, General Pupanog, da 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 da, especially the Moore Bond. And we love that, when he says, Scaramanga, da 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 da. And he's waxing poetic. Fleming did the same thing. Fleming wrote about Bond being hyper competent in the world of knowledge and understanding who his enemies are, where the politics are, and therefore how to use that knowledge in a skilled way to get his job done in a superlative fashion. That is the very definition of hypercompetency, and I'm not there. I'm maybe it's a mini confession. I don't know. I don't know. But I'm not an overly political person. I don't like to read about politics. It's, I think, a little bit dramatic, but that's just me. So I don't always know what's going on. That's fine. But you know something, in the geographical world of where things are and sit, it is a mystery how Bond could be so hyper competent with knowledge in general. I have a lot of knowledge about a few little things. The pharmaceutical industry, because it's my job. Marketing, things like public speaking and pitches and business development and all those things, because again, it's what I've been born and raised in. A franchise called James Bond, know quite a bit about that, right? Style, little bit, no, a decent amount, right? So I'm hyper competent in those small areas of knowledge. Bugs Bunny too, for some weird reason, and the Little Rascals. Childhood. But beyond that, the ways of the world, not so much, which is probably why I love traveling so much. I do feel that I'm getting those small nuggets of knowledge every time I travel and learn about other people's cultures, the politics, the geography, the individuals that sit there. And I love it because it's new and it's fresh. And I would imagine that's why Bond likes to travel too. He tends to add to his hyper competency with knowledge and travel and culture. And who doesn't like that? Okay. So the last thing I'm going to leave you with this whole discussion of hypercompetency is the journey. So I could wax poetic for many, many minutes, but I don't want to beat a dead horse either about the list, the absolute nauseating list of hypercompetency that James Bond has, and why we watch these movies and we're like, oh my gosh, look at that. But I do want to talk about the psychology of it. This whole idea of emulation, of striving to be the best that you can be, very often we look for icons. We look for examples. We look for real individuals and fictional individuals to be that guiding light, if you will. Now we've done it and we talk about it a lot with style, but hypercompetency has the same type of icons. You would be hard pressed in the world to find a more complete icon of hypercompetency than James Bond. But there is a negative psychology to this as well. And that is that whole idea of striving for that and constantly failing. We will never, never be as hyper competent as James Bond because he ain't real. Bop. Right. So what we've got to do is when we go on this journey, when we take a look at the idea of hypercompetency and do we even engage with it? Do we involve it in our life? The one sobering moment we have to understand is that it's never going to be to that level. But wow, could the journey be fun in trying to get there? And that's what I'm talking about. It is absolutely the pathway to full hypercompetency that should be your moment of joy, not the end, not the trophy. Because like I said in the first 2 minutes of this video, the end is literally the end. You'll never get to full hypercompetency. You'll never get to Bond's level, and that's okay as long as you're progressing and striving and going for that. Hypercompetency in certain areas, well, it's why we have different content creators in different corners of this James Bond community. Everybody has their niche and what they're special at, but nobody's great at everything. I know, I'm sounding like a dad now. Nobody's great at everything. You tried. No, I get it. My whole thing is I don't want you to be disappointed. And I don't want you to shoot for an unrealistic version of who you can be. Get to the best version of who you can be, and then guess what? I'm gonna tell you a little secret. You can actually anoint yourself a hyper competent individual. Nobody's going to anoint you beyond you. You have to come to your own conclusion. So at the end of the day, the confidence that's created in being a hyper competent individual, only one person can give that to you, and that's you. So I find that incredibly, I don't know, a relief, if you will, because if it was anointed or adorned by somebody else, chances are you'd either never get it, you never get there, or you'd be disappointed constantly. So it comes from within. I know, it's like a Dorothy moment. The power was within you all along. Click. What is it, 3 times? No, it's Beetlejuice. I don't know. But anyway, hypercompetency, look it up. I think you're going to like this term, and I'm going to use it from time to time when I talk about some of these how to be like Bond moments. You'll see it crop up, so I thought I'd give like a little bit of a 101. Anyway, I'm going to go do something hyper-competent like eat a carrot. So good at that. So good at eating carrots. You have no idea. In the meantime, this has been David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience. We'll see you all real soon. Take care. Thanks for watching this episode. If you want to be up on the latest from the Bond Experience, just click on this subscribe and subscribe to our channel. You're going to get all the latest and greatest information, plus some exclusive content. And by the way, speaking of content, here's something especially for you, just because we know you. Talk to you soon.